And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Agentic Insurer. This is episode 3, The Trust Paradox: Speed, Accuracy, and Autonomy. My name is Nick Lamparelli. I will be the host and moderator of this quick bite-sized podcast on AI. My guest today is Grady Behrens. Grady, welcome.
Thanks, Nick.
Grady, we start all of these by giving the guest a little bit of an opportunity to introduce themselves. Grady, who are you and what do you do?
Sure. Grady Behrens, and when I was young, I wanted to be a robot. Now that I have grown up, I work for an AI company. So is that close enough? I don't
Very
know.
close.
Um, no, I lead our product marketing at Shift Technology, and essentially, Nick, I've worked in product strategy. So, what is the customer? What does the consumer want in a product, and how do we tell an effective and honest story about what is available?
Yeah. So thank you for that. You don't look like a robot, but it's you're actually making them, so that's close enough. Very good. So Grady, in my experience dealing with carriers, MGAs, anyone that's on the organizational side of insurance, there is a trust element. You are seeing some organizations who are, I think, fully committing to the trust, maybe overcommitting, but I'm
Hmm.
also seeing a lot of organizations that really are, they don't feel like the technology is trustworthy. Can you talk a little bit about how you think about, as a profession, as a technology professional, how you think about how these organizations might want to consider how much line to let out on the trust factor?
Sure. Well, I think even outside of insurance, we're all asking
Mm,
ourselves right now, what
yep.
is the role of AI and how does it help us, but how is it a way that can be done in a way that we can trust, right? It comes back to that word. And what I think is important in insurance is insurance protects people. It protects obviously our property, our car, our home, our safety when we travel, our health as well. But it's meant to protect people, and so there's a different kind of trust that has to occur for insurers when it comes to AI versus just can I trust the answer when I search something on the internet using an LLM. It needs to be in a way that we know that it's actually going to be accurate, but also supportive of the policyholder. So I think that all insurers are thinking about what does trust mean is important. But I would actually take a step back on it, Nick, and say insurers really need to think about what is it that they want to achieve with AI and how does that relate to trust. So when it comes to the basic business challenge of what are we trying to solve, are we trying to solve for speed? Are we trying to solve for efficiency? Are we trying to solve for accuracy? Because that sets up the frame by which we establish trust. So, what do I mean by that? I mean, efficiency is a good example where if there are things that uh, AI could do for an insurer in the background that ultimately a human is still looking at as they work through a claim or as they work through a policy or whatever it might be, well, there's certainly some efficiency and probably some speed there. But the conversation of trust is not so important because ultimately the human is still making a review and a decision. And as long as the business process is set up, it doesn't affect the policyholder in the same way that if an insurer is looking for something like accuracy, for example, in say liability determination, well, there, if AI is being used, this really starts to bring in trust for the policyholder and the claimant because AI is taking a role in trying to discern liability. And so that's what I mean by an insurer really needs to think about what is it they're trying to do first. What's the ultimate goal there? Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
it completely, but it sounds like from what you're saying, this gives the opportunity for the organization, carrier, MGA, whoever, to, it sounds like they have to dig deeper into the workflow. because everyone will say, well, we want to be faster, we want to be more efficient, we want better accuracy. But what does that mean? It almost, from a strategy perspective, Grady, sounds like lots of offsites to sort of dig down, because I think what's going to happen is they're going to determine, well, we're doing a lot of steps we may not need to do anymore. And this is probably a good reset for the organization around just their entire workflow. Getting back to answering the question you asked, like, what are we trying to achieve? Can you talk about like digging deep, peeling back layers of the onion?
Yeah. Well, thankfully, I think I agree with you. It does involve some offsites and really thinking about process. And in particular, I think it's about figuring out what is the relationship between where AI is used and the human collaboration. Um, but that sound makes it sound more daunting than it actually is. It's just the need to be precise. Saying things like, for example, claims automation, a term that's
Yeah.
common to the industry. Well, there are so many things that happen in a claim, and of course, there are very simple claims, there are complex claims, there's all kinds of different claims. So, what do we mean when we say claims automation? It's just pushing down a level and saying, well, how exactly are we going to automate this claim? So it's not necessarily as complicated as having to really do lots and lots of exhaustive deep dive on process, because it's a chance to actually just reimagine individual process in claims. And so certainly there's an aspect where you would want to use an offsite to really talk through what are you trying to achieve, but it doesn't have to be so complex. When we work with insurers, one of the things we do is we think about what are some basic steps that have to occur in any of the claims process, whether that's liability, whether that's subrogation,
Hmm.
whether that's just coverage determination. And there are places where a decision isn't being made, and therefore opportunities to automate and accelerate might be faster. And then there are places where a decision really does need to be made. Things like, is there a reason to investigate this claim or policy for fraud? Is there a reason to triage this claim and have somebody immediately call the policyholder or the claimant? And those are the places where trust, I think, really comes in, because then it's a decision by the insurer of what do I want to use AI for? Do I want to use it for accuracy here? Do I want to use it for an efficiency where the handler or the adjuster or the investigator just has to do a couple of quick checks? Or do I want to use it for really guiding them through the process, but not necessarily taking over the process? So it's those decision points that are really important to identify when it comes to the topic of trust. Lots of things that happen on either side that aren't necessarily decision points.
Yeah. I'm going to throw in, might be a new term as I was thinking of it. I don't think I've ever heard it before. We've heard of the customer experience. As you're describing that, Grady, I'm thinking of the stakeholder experience, right? So,
Hmm.
what is it that we're trying to accomplish? It's you have TPAs, you have your customer, you have potentially your defense counsel. Like, there's a lot of stakeholders in like a hub and spoke model with insurers, and you're trying to accomplish a whole bunch of different things. And would something like a stakeholder experience, mapping that out and say in the what are we trying to accomplish, it's more than just like more money, less expense, but like what is it we're trying to do? Are we trying to streamline things? How much do we streamline? Having a stakeholder experience model, might that help in an insurance organization?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, Nick. And when I when I consider the multiple parties that are involved
Mm-hmm.
in any claim more than a simple claim, right? Um, eh, what I think about there is that trust might mean something different for different party holders,
Mm-hmm.
and the information that is provided might need to vary. So, in the case of a claim that might involve, litigation or, let's say attorneys or other partners, it's not about a withholding some information from others. It's bringing the most pertinent information to each
Mm-hmm.
of them so that they can understand what's happening. So a loss adjuster might need to see something different for what they actually need to accomplish and do as a task. versus the policyholder versus a medical management team or a
Right.
litigation team, right? And so in those circumstances, trust might look like all of the information is available to all, but the way that it's presented or the way that, say, agentic AI might organize that information so that all can review might change.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I was as you were describing that, I was imagining an auto adjustment claim. How can insurance organizations deal with stakeholders where the other party may not be AI savvy? They're still more in the analog world, which for auto adjusters, you can almost expect like a high percentage of them will not be even digitally connected. They might have an email address, right? There might not be much there for them to engage in. And so, but yet still, there's an experience there. There's a what are we trying to accomplish element of that. How would you guide an organization that's dealing with stakeholders that are more analog? Let's just use that term.
Yeah. Well, this is where, to me, the Arise framework that Shift introduced for agentic AI comes in, and it's not a proprietary framework for us. It's just simply being able to say, what level of autonomy do you want AI to have? Do you want it to be something that can provide answers like a chatbot? Do you want it to be something that can provide guidance? Do you want it to be something that can automate after a human review? Do you want it to be something that, again, in non-high risk decisions, automates things like data pulls and whatnot? But my point about that is, I think that helps to frame how you might use AI with different stakeholders, because if you have somebody who, let's say they are less likely or would prefer to use analog methods, then there are likely ways that you could actually embed AI in the background to do some of the things for them where they don't necessarily have to engage with the digital experience. It actually runs for them. Whereas you can imagine somebody who really wants to, leverage a knowledge chat or, ask questions of knowing that they're speaking to AI or working with AI, get into it further. But, I would say the whole world is changing right now in terms of use of AI, and not just AI, but technology, right? So there are many ways in which agentic AI models or mirrors some of the experience that we have with technology. I mean, it's intended to be like the
Yep.
experiences that we have technically. So while there are folks who just will always want or prefer an analog experience, um, I have not actually seen a tendency from say employees at a in a claims organization to be completely tech illiterate or anything like that. In fact, I think across the board people are experiencing the use of tech.
Yeah. So, Grady, before we go to the last segment of our particular conversation, you mentioned Arise. Can you give a brief description of what Arise means?
Sure. So Arise is a framework for how AI is used autonomously in insurance. And Arise is an acronym. So the
Yep.
first level for A is answers, which just means an agent that answers questions. So you could think of this like a chatbot
Yep.
or a knowledge chat, something where the information is provided. R is recommends, and this is the level 2 where an agent starts to give advice for what to do. So you can see that transition between, am I just providing information or am I actually suggesting to you what you should do in this situation? I is initiates, that's the level 3. And when an agent initiates automation, what it means is that it can actually prepare all the work that needs to be done, but a human would still decide whether that work should be done or not. But then the work could be done by the agent. S is solves, and this is where at level 4, the agent is actually taking the steps to automate a task or a process or a decision, and it happens at a 99% accuracy level. So you can see there's a relationship between level 3 where it could automate those steps, but a human is reviewing, to level 4 solves, where it is taking those steps without having to do a check-in. And then 5, which is a bit futuristic, is the idea of exceeds. And in the context of insurance, what this really means is AI finding new and better paths to tackle a process or a task. and being able to use those to actually adjust, make change management, and change the way that
Yeah.
insurance is happening. So the idea there would be it exceeds even the best loss adjuster, the best human decision maker in the organization.
Yeah, it sounds like a phenomenal framework, and as you said, it's out there. This is not proprietary to what you do, which I think is a great springboard to the final segment, because I think most of the trust or lack of trust is going to be on the autonomy piece of it, but also the LLMs.
Mm-hmm.
And I want you to think of, I want my question for you will kind of break this up into two pieces, because I think there's two trust elements here. One is, as you go through a rise, like it's doing things, it's recommending things. And the other aspect is training a model, like if it's ChatGPT or Claude, that's kind of the engine for that, sharing proprietary information, intellectual property and other stuff. And I've seen a lot of organizations, especially on the latter, saying, whoa, I'm not uploading my folder, I'm not giving them access to this data. Can you talk about each of those? We talk about autonomy, but the trust factor around the actual models, the accuracy. And I
Mm-hmm.
think with insurance, 99% may not even be enough. It might be like 99 point something that's
Right.
going to be required because of the regulatory piece. But also to get there, an internal organization has their own policies and procedures and other stuff that need to be modeled and to train in AI. Seems like a dilemma, Grady.
Yeah. Well, to get at the first part there, Nick, where we're talking about how does it work best for insurance, I think this is really where expertise has to come in. So, you know, general model LLMs are not designed for insurance, and
Yep.
they're not
Nope.
pretending that they are. They're not designed for insurance, right? A step needs to be taken to actually shape the data going in, the prompting, and the usage, and around that, one of the most useful things I've heard recently was a webinar that I was on for Shift, and the idea is we're not. It's not about deploying a model. It's about designing a process where a model is used. And what I mean by that is we've had this at Shift for quite some time, using AI, where we have to be able to have paths where AI is able to say, I don't know, or
Yeah.
I don't think I have enough information, instead of guessing. And beyond that, there has to be multiple redundancies. In order to get to 99.5% accuracy or more, you have to have multiple redundancies that say, okay, I'm going to check this. Maybe I'm going to use agentic AI to check agentic AI. Maybe I'm going to use a different form of AI. Maybe I'm going to use a completely different tool, and validate that, as opposed to it just saying, okay, I'm going to let this model go and let it train as it goes, right? Like that just is not how the industry can use AI for the reasons of accuracy and trust. So there has to be some redundancies there when it's deployed. Um, the other thing there, from a insurer's perspective, and it gets back to the first question, is what are you trying to do, and where do you need to have trust in decision making? And so there are some things that happen in insurance. There are some process and some decisions that happen in insurance that should never be automated. I'm going to go ahead and say that. I'm sure somebody disagrees with me somewhere, right? But I think that there are some decisions that should never be automated. They should be held by humans. And that doesn't mean, though, so that might be the level 4 of Arise doesn't happen in that decision or that process. But you could be using level 5 in the background to say, is there a better way we could be doing this? And a human actually reviews that and says, well, maybe this is a better process for this decision going forward. So there are ways that AI can be used in that aspect.
Please go ahead.
To the topic of model security, I mean, this is an incredibly important topic, and there are a lot of different options that are available on this. Um, Shift works with Microsoft as a partner for agentic AI, and one of the reasons we do that is it provides a number of layers of security for where the data is held, how it's used, and insurer data remaining insurer data. But I do think the security aspect, which is incredibly important for trust with policyholders, is a separate topic from the proprietary topic of information. Like, is my, the way that I do insurance, is it going to be learned by an AI agent? Because honestly, the answer there is yes. It is going to be learned by AI, because that AI is attempting to understand your process.
Yeah.
And there, it's really an insurer making a decision about, do I want to benefit from the scale of what the industry is doing, and access some of those level 5 opportunities where I could learn to do my process better, or do I believe that my baby is the most beautiful baby in the world? Um, and I would really encourage any technologist and an insurer to think about, what is that trade-off between AI being able to look at, proprietary data, and in a secure manner, of course, versus holding on to it, but maybe not being able to innovate, maybe not being able to access those kinds of, exceeds what my best teams or my best process can do today. So that's where I think that is actually just a business decision. Do you want to hold everything as proprietary, or do you want to access the innovation that can come from leveraging AI
Yeah.
and vendor AI?
Grady, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I think this is where probably the regulators are going to probably create the guardrails exactly how you described, and we're already seeing it. Where you put a human in the loop, I think the regulators are going to force that for a significant period of time until these models kind of prove themselves. But their activities to protect the consumer are likely to set the guardrails where organizations probably can have a more a higher degree of trust towards everything that you're talking about with agentic AI, because there are going to be limitations that are going to be across the board. With a human in the loop, that means every insurance organization is going to have that same human in the loop. And so I think it will allow, the regulations may allow the insurance organizations to move faster, just knowing that some things will be a competitive edge, but some of it will not. And in those areas, there's still going to be a human. And so it gets back to, I think we're back to the future, to the beginning. Like, what are you trying to accomplish?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just to riff on your point about where regulators might just create a path where it's not necessarily an advantage over other insurers. I think the advantage there is, how fast are you willing to move? Are you ready to take these steps now? And in the case of Shift, working with a technology partner that can get you there quickly. But I think it's going to come down to not necessarily the advantage of, do you use AI or not, but are you planning it out in an appropriate way? Are you deciding what it is you want to accomplish? And are you designing that for trust with your policyholders, your specific policyholders?
Yeah. Grady, fantastic way to end this particular episode. So for the audience, this was a conversation around basically AI and trust. My guest was Grady Behrens. So for Grady and for myself, Nick Lamparelli, thank you for watching this episode. And until next time.